The document was 49 pages long. That is the first thing that surprised Gerald Moss, the branch vice president at Tri-County Agricultural Bank in Caldwell County, Kentucky, when Nora Harmon set it on his desk on the morning of September 11, 2019. He had handled agricultural foreclosures for 11 years. He had seen a great many documents brought into a great many meetings by people who believed those documents would change something. Most of them were 4 pages. Some were 8. One, memorably, had been a handwritten letter that ran to 14 pages and had not changed anything at all. 49 pages was new. Gerald Moss picked it up. He read the first paragraph. He set it back down and looked at Nora Harmon. She was 63 years old, gray-haired, wearing a barn coat she had not taken off, and she had the expression of a person who has been waiting for this specific meeting for a long time. Gerald Moss said he would need to get the bank's attorney on the phone. Nora said she expected he would. She sat down and waited. If you've ever watched someone walk into a room already knowing what's in it, while everyone else is still figuring it out, subscribe before we go any further. This whole channel is about that moment. We'll be here as long as you keep watching. The 200 acres in question sat in the southern half of Caldwell County, in the Purchase region of western Kentucky, on a ridgeline above the muddy fork of the Tradewater River. The land had been in the Harmon family since 1919, when Nora's grandfather, a man named Clyde Harmon, purchased it from a timber company that had cut the best hardwood off it and considered what remained to be largely without value. Clyde did not disagree about the timber, but he had looked at the ridgeline and the 2 hollows that came off it, and he had looked at the spring that came out of the limestone at the base of the eastern hollow. And he had decided that a man who owned a reliable spring in a dry county was a man who could always run cattle. He was right. Clyde Harmon ran Hereford cattle on that ground from 1921 until his death in 1971. Not many. The ground was thin in places, and the hollows went wet in March in a way that required management. And the ridgeline pastures could get rough in dry summers when the fescue burned out. But enough. Enough to pay the taxes and keep the fences up and make the modest improvements that the land required over 50 years. The spring box in 1929. The main barn in 1934, built partly with timber salvaged from a neighbor's collapsed structure. The well in 1947. He sent his son Raymond to a year of agricultural college in Lexington in 1957. Which was a sacrifice that did not announce itself as a sacrifice because Clyde did not announce things. Raymond came back to the farm in 1958, as Clyde had expected he would, and took over the daily operation, and Clyde stepped back in the way older farmers step back when they have someone to hand things to. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, season by season, until by the mid-1960s Raymond was making the decisions, and Clyde was the one who walked the fences and checked the spring. Clyde died in March of 1971. He was 74. He had been running cattle on that ridgeline for 50 years. Raymond ran the farm until 2001, when a stroke took the use of his left hand and made the physical work impossible. Raymond died in 2009, and the farm passed to Nora, his only child, who had been living in Paducah and working as a hospital administrator, and who had not, in the years since her father's stroke, done an adequate job of watching the note. The note was the problem. Raymond had borrowed $76,000 against the property in 1998 to put in a tile drainage system on the 2 wet hollows, which he believed, correctly as it happened, would make them productive enough to justify the cost over time. He had been paying the note down since 1998. By the time it passed to Nora in 2009, the balance was $41,200. By 2015, when Nora had consolidated it into a new operating note at Tri-County Agricultural Bank, The balance was $38,800, and the interest rate on the new note was 5.9%, and Nora had not thought carefully enough about the amortization schedule before she signed. By August of 2019, the balance was $44,100, which was more than she had started with 4 years earlier, and Gerald Moss had sent 2 letters and made 1 phone call. The phone call had been in July. He had been polite. He had said the bank would need to begin foreclosure proceedings on the 200-acre parcel, which was the primary collateral for the note, unless the account was brought current within 90 days. 90 days put the deadline at mid-October. The meeting on September 11th was 6 weeks in. Nora had not spent those 6 weeks trying to find money. She had spent them in her father's farmhouse. She had moved into the farmhouse in August, which was not a thing she had planned to do, but which had started to feel necessary once she understood the situation clearly enough to understand what it would require. She had requested unpaid leave from the hospital in Paducah and driven to Caldwell County with 2 weeks of clothes and a box of file folders and her father's farm journals, which she had taken from the house when Raymond died and had been keeping in a storage unit in Paducah for 10 years because she had not been able to throw them away and had not been able to read them either. She read them in August. All of them. 9 wire-bound journals going back to 1962, the first year Raymond had kept records, covering 40 years of a farm operation in Caldwell County, Kentucky, in the handwriting of a man she had watched move carefully across a farmyard her entire childhood, without understanding that he was also writing all of it down. He had written down everything: spray dates, cattle weights, fence repairs, veterinary visits, soil test results, the weather on the days he moved cattle between paddocks, which cows were easy to handle and which were not, the spring water depth in July, measured with a wooden stake he apparently kept for that purpose, which sections of fence needed new posts and which could go another year. He had written down financial transactions, purchases and sales, loan payments, tax obligations, equipment repairs, in a column down the right margin of each page, in a small, careful hand that was easier to read than his regular writing, as if he had reserved that part of his penmanship for numbers and kept it separate from the rest. Nora had not known her father kept journals. He had never mentioned them, and she had not asked, because she had not known the right question to ask. She read them at the kitchen table over 3 weeks in August, each morning with coffee, working through them chronologically. By the end of the second journal, she had started keeping her own notes, questions the journals raised that she could not answer, things that didn't square with what she remembered, passages she wanted to come back to. In the fourth journal, covering 1971 and 1972, Raymond had written a note on the inside front cover. It was not a farm record. It was a personal note, written in a slightly different hand than the rest of the journal. Not hurried, but different. The way a person's handwriting changes when they are writing something they want to be careful about. It said, "The trust is filed at the courthouse. Deed Book 47, page 319. Clyde made it in 1966. He did not tell me until the day he died." That was all. Nora had read that note on a Tuesday evening in early August, sitting at her father's kitchen table with the journal open in front of her and a cup of coffee she had stopped drinking. She had read it several times. Then she had driven to the Caldwell County Courthouse in Princeton on Wednesday morning when it opened. Deed Book 47, page 319. The county clerk, a woman named Sandra Whitfield, who had worked in that office for 19 years and knew the recording system the way most people know their own handwriting, found it in 11 minutes. She brought the volume to the counter and opened it to page 319 and set it in front of Nora without ceremony, because that was the job, to retrieve the record, not to interpret it. The record was a declaration of trust. Clyde Harmon had created a family land trust in March of 1966, 5 years before his death, using an attorney in Princeton named Warren Atkinson. The document was 49 pages, which was long by the standards of such instruments in Kentucky in 1966, and reflected either Warren Atkinson's thoroughness or his billing habits, or both. It established the Harmon Family Agricultural Land Trust as the legal title holder of the 200-acre Caldwell County parcel, with beneficial interest reserved to Clyde and his heirs in a line of succession that the document specified in careful detail for 4 generations. The key provision was on page 11. It was a single paragraph, 8 sentences long, and it said, in Warren Atkinson's language, complete, deliberate, the product of a man who had learned that ambiguity in property documents costs more than the extra billable hour required to eliminate it, that no beneficiary of the trust, acting individually, could pledge, mortgage, encumber, or otherwise attach the trust property as collateral for any personal or business debt without the written, notarized consent of all living adult beneficiaries. Raymond had been the sole living adult beneficiary in 1998 when he borrowed the $76,000. He had listed the 200 acres as collateral. He had not obtained written, notarized consent from any other beneficiary, because at the time, his daughter Nora was the only other potential beneficiary, and she had been living in Paducah, and neither Raymond nor the bank had asked whether the land was held in trust. Nora had been 22 in 1998. She had not been consulted. The collateral on both the 1998 note and the 2015 Tri-County note had been pledged by a person who did not have the trust's authority to pledge it. Nora had not understood all of this on Wednesday morning when Sandra Whitfield set Deed Book 47 in front of her. She understood the trust existed and that it had a consent requirement. She drove home and read the 49 pages in 2 sittings. Then she called a property attorney in Hopkinsville named Beth Lear, who had been recommended by a colleague in Paducah. Beth Lear called her back that afternoon, and Nora read her the consent provision over the phone. Beth Lear was quiet for a moment. Then she asked Nora to send her a photograph of the entire document. She sent 49 photographs. Beth Lear spent 3 days with the document, then called Nora and asked 3 specific questions about the succession line: who was living, who was deceased, and in what order the beneficial interest had passed. Nora answered all 3 from memory, confirmed by the journals. Beth Lear said she needed another day. She then called an attorney in Louisville who specialized in trust law, a man named Crestwood Mills, whose actual first name was Gerald, but who had gone by Crestwood since law school for reasons he declined to explain and which Nora did not ask about a second time. Crestwood Mills spent a week reviewing the trust declaration, the 1998 loan documentation from the predecessor bank, and the 2015 Tri-County note. He found, in addition to the consent provision, 2 other clauses in Warren Atkinson's 49 pages that were potentially relevant, though the consent provision was the one that mattered. He wrote a memorandum of 17 pages. Beth Lear read it twice and condensed it into an opinion letter of 6 pages, with 4 attachments. She told Nora it was as solid a position as she had seen in a trust dispute of this type. She did not guarantee outcomes. She said, "Go to the meeting." That folder sat on Gerald Moss's desk for 45 minutes on the morning of September 11, 2019, while he and the bank's attorney, a man named Phil Decker, who drove down from Madisonville and arrived at the bank 18 minutes after Gerald Moss had called him, which Nora later calculated meant he had already been on the road, read the trust declaration and Beth Lear's letter in a conference room that smelled of the carpet cleaner they had used that morning. Nora sat in Gerald Moss's office and waited. Gerald Moss had told her it would take some time and offered her coffee, which she accepted and did not drink. His office was a standard-issue bank branch office, the framed community photos, the regional bank calendar, the degree on the wall from Murray State, the desk with a computer monitor at an angle. Nora had sat in many offices over 28 years as a hospital administrator, and she had learned to read offices the way some people read faces. This one said, "A careful man, not an unkind one, doing a job that sometimes required him to do things he did not particularly enjoy." She did not hold that against him. She was not nervous. That was the thing Gerald Moss mentioned later, when he described the meeting to his wife that evening. He said he had expected the woman to be anxious. The situation she was in warranted it. But she was not. She had a notepad and a pen on her knee, and she did not write anything in the notepad during the 45 minutes she sat there, and she did not look at her phone. She looked out his window, which faced the parking lot, and past that, the soybean field that ran along the south side of the county road into Princeton. Late summer beans, just beginning to yellow. She looked at them the way a farmer looks at crops, not casually, but with attention. He said she looked like someone waiting for a bus she already knew was coming. The bus arrived. Phil Decker came back into Gerald Moss's office at 11:40 and sat down across from Nora with Beth Lear's letter in his hand and said that the bank recognized the document raised significant questions regarding the validity of the collateral interest in the 2015 note. He said the bank would need time to evaluate its position. He said he understood this was a difficult situation for everyone. Nora said she understood they needed time. Phil Decker asked if she was represented by counsel. Nora gave him Beth Lear's card. Phil Decker said they would be in touch. What followed was 4 months of correspondence between Beth Lear and the bank's counsel, who turned out to be not Phil Decker but a firm in Paducah that Tri-County Agricultural retained for matters that exceeded Phil Decker's particular expertise. Nora did not hear from the bank directly during those 4 months. She heard from Beth Lear, who gave her updates that were precise and brief. Here is where we are. Here is what they have said. Here is what I have said in return. The correspondence was careful on both sides and moved at the pace of people who are trying to establish positions without conceding anything they don't have to concede. Beth Lear cited Crestwood Mills's memorandum and 4 Kentucky cases. The Paducah firm cited 2 cases of their own and made one argument about the good faith execution of the 2015 note that Crestwood Mills addressed in a supplemental memorandum of 8 pages. Beth Lear forwarded the memorandum. The Paducah firm did not reply to it directly. That silence, Beth Lear told Nora, was itself a kind of reply. In January of 2020, the bank agreed to reclassify the Tri-County note as an unsecured obligation and restructure the balance over 14 years at a fixed rate of 4.75%. The foreclosure proceeding was dismissed. The 200-acre Caldwell County parcel remained in the Harmon Family Agricultural Land Trust, exactly as Clyde had arranged in March of 1966 when he drove to Warren Atkinson's office in Princeton and told him he needed something that would hold. Warren Atkinson had charged him $140 for the trust. Nora found the receipt in a folder in Raymond's filing cabinet, dated March 8, 1966. She has kept it. Beth Lear's total fee, through resolution of the matter, was $9,400. Crestwood Mills billed $3,200. The Caldwell County Clerk's certified copy fee was $18. Nora has been paying the restructured note since February of 2020. She retired from the hospital in Paducah in the spring of 2022 and moved to the Caldwell County farmhouse full-time. She spent the first summer repainting the exterior and replacing the back porch boards, which had gone soft, and getting the well pump serviced, which turned out to need a new pressure tank. She also learned that first summer, what the farm journals had described, but what she had not yet understood in her hands, that the 2 hollows Raymond tiled in 1998 were genuinely good ground. Dark, deep-bottomed, well-watered, producing grass from April through October, without much encouragement. She put 12 Hereford Devon cross cows on them in the fall of 2022, and added 8 more in the spring of 2023. She sells beef through a cooperative buying club in Murray and a restaurant in Hopkinsville that sources local grass-finished beef, and that had, the first time Nora called to introduce herself and describe the operation, asked her to come in and talk. She went in on a Tuesday and talked to the chef for 40 minutes and left with a commitment for 4 animals per year. The spring in the Eastern Hollow still runs. She checks it every July, the same month Raymond's journals noted the water depth, using a wooden stake she cut from a fence post offcut and marked in inches. It has not failed her yet. Clyde Harmon could not have known, in March of 1966, that his granddaughter would be sitting in a bank office in Princeton 53 years later with a 49-page document that would keep the land in the family. He could not have known about the tile drainage note, or the adjustable rate, or any of it. He knew what he knew. He knew land left families when the title wasn't built to hold. He had seen it happen enough times to build something specifically designed to prevent it. And then he had put it in the deed books at the Caldwell County Courthouse and gone back to running his Herefords, and had not mentioned it to Raymond until the day he died. That is a particular kind of patience. Not the patience of waiting. Clyde was not sitting somewhere waiting for 2019. He was out working. He was running cattle and repairing fence and checking the spring depth with a marked stake in July. He was doing all the visible work of a farm, while also having done, quietly, in March of 1966, one invisible thing that nobody would see the purpose of for 53 years. Warren Atkinson's receipt for $140 is in a frame on the wall of the Caldwell County farmhouse now. Nora hung it there the week she moved in full-time. Not because it is beautiful. Because it is the most consequential document in the house. And she wants to be reminded of that. Clyde Harmon never saw it framed. He never saw 2019. He never heard about the Tri-County Note or Phil Decker or the Paducah Law Firm or any of it. He built the wall and went back to his Herefords and did not explain himself to anyone. And 53 years later, the wall was exactly where he had put it, doing exactly what he had designed it to do. Not everyone understands that work like that is work. Not everyone builds for a problem they will not live to see. Clyde did. That is the kind of work that holds.